Just before 10:30 this morning, that airport about 45 miles north of Charlotte, it is closed until further notice, and we are working to get more details for you. Meantime, a little bit closer to home, want to get a check of the forecast. Meteorologist Colleen Campbell standing by for a look at that because, Colleen, we have rain in the forecast and a lot of people on the roads out there.
Yeah, Frank, this is going to take place during the evening commute. Some of you may have already seen those showers in the area, but we are starting this weather impact alerts at 3 p.m. because that's when the bulk of the rainfall will be on the way for the evening hours. And that's when most of you will likely be on the road as well. So starting off with when is it today at 3 p.m. from 8 p.m. That doesn't mean the rain's going to turn off at 8 p.m. It just means that things will start to slow down traffic-wise. Also, the front is moving through in the overnight hours, and it will start to slow down as well. The front goes. As we look at the impact, the heavy rain can be leading to some downpours as well as some wet roadways during that evening commute. And what you need to do, make sure you have the app downloaded and also follow us on streaming, which you're doing right now, so that's great. Satellite radar here, we have that rain that's moving across the panhandle, coming down at a pretty moderate to heavy pace at times. We are starting to see those showers ahead of that main system, starting to move across portions of our area. Hernando County, Pasco County, Citrus County have been seeing more rain than what they saw this morning. Also, we had some rain to start off the showers driven by a southeasterly wind. Those are starting to subside as the rest of this front begins to push in. You will notice a change in the wind direction as this front gets closer and closer, and that will be our driver of today's weather. Here's a European model showing that front. This is at 6 o'clock tonight. Moving into about 7 p.m., we have this system that is pushing through. Some of that rain will be heavy at times. You maybe hear a rumble of thunder. That continues as we move into 10 o'clock. And that's the recap that we have on the weather, and we'll have more in just a little bit.
All right, thank you, Colleen. We'll stay posted with the weather situation. Meantime, I want to turn back to this breaking news because 10 Tampa Bay News reporter Kristen Barbarisi joining us live from Sarasota Bradenton International Airport. The flight that we're talking about with this fatal crash that took place this morning was actually headed to SRQ. Kristen, what have you learned?
That's right. The plane was headed here to Sarasota, but unfortunately we know it crashed about a half hour after it took off. Authorities in North Carolina say the plane became fully engulfed. Multiple people were killed, including retired NASCAR driver Greg Biffle. Public records show his family actually owned the plane. We don't know exactly how many people were on board or the total number of people that were killed. The FAA got on scene in North Carolina at about noon along with the NTSB. They will be leading the investigation. Again, a spokesperson for the Sarasota airport confirmed the plane was headed here. It's a Cessna C550. Typically that's a plane that can hold about 8 people. We don't, again, know how many people were on board other than retired NASCAR driver Greg Biffle. Typically there will be a preliminary investigation report released within about a day or so, but information in it could be quite limited. A full NTSB report will take months, potentially even a year. We are still working again to confirm how many people were on board, but we know that plane that crashed in North Carolina, killing multiple people, including retired NASCAR driver Greg Biffle, was headed here to Sarasota. Of course, we're going to bring any updates as we get them. For now, I'll send it back to you, Frank.
All right, thank you, Kristen. Of course, our team will continue to dig into that situation here as well as our sister station up in North Carolina. In fact, they are from WCNC. Want to go ahead and tap back into their coverage to see what they've learned.
Last hour. Probably in the process.
Just heartbreaking. I just learned about it 20, 30 minutes ago. I don't know that we know the number of casualties. Obviously, a number of people were impacted. Our hearts go out to those families. Nothing more tragic way to walk into the holiday season. I will say that the SBI, State Bureau of Investigation, the Highway Patrol, they're on the site. They're working with the FAA. They're working with the local sheriff. So this is, again, a whole of government approach, local, state, and federal. And they're going to do everything they can to figure out what happened because we don't want these kinds of accidents to occur. Just heartbreaking.
So that was Governor Josh Stein with his just initial thoughts on this heartbreaking situation. He was there separately in Old Fort to be making an announcement about Helene recovery, specifically with water issues that the community in Western North Carolina has been dealing with since that tragedy over a year ago now, and now him having to handle yet another one. Of course, heartbreaking, especially not just for everyone, but for the NASCAR community in particular. It's poignant, especially because Greg Biffle donated so much of his time and resources to helping Helene victims. We know that he was a pilot.
Just charity in general.
Yes. Yeah, we know he went to Jamaica recently, you mentioned, as a pilot.
After Melissa, Hurricane Melissa. I mean, the man, as Brad said before, the man was known almost more so for what he did after he got out of the race car.
Yeah.
And his impact here in the Charlotte area. He's not from here.
No.
But he's now
Washington State, correct?
Washington State.
Yeah. But just showing you the impact he's made here, he's made this his home.
Right.
And just absolutely heartbreaking, especially knowing that his 2 children were on board as well. I know that now, as the community reacts, obviously heartbroken, we are going to have some more questions about what actually happened here. So that's what the NTSB is doing. That's what the FAA is doing. I'm sure our local officials were getting information and updates from the Iredell County Sheriff regularly. We are also curious about this plane itself. As I've mentioned, it is a small corporate jet, the Cessna C550, also known as a Citation II. So I got a chance a little bit earlier, if you missed it, to speak with an aviation attorney pretty much right after this happened. So this was even prior to us confirming it was Greg Biffle and his family on this plane.
Correct. So we should mention that so that we didn't know at this time when this happened.
This was actually like right as you and Brad were confirming it. I was in the middle of this interview. So, but we really did focus more on the plane itself, the flight pattern. We know that Brad broke this down to, it looks like, since they were only in the air for 10 minutes, we can see the flight pattern, that they had the wherewithal to turn around at some point, kind of indicating some sort of mechanical issue, maybe some sort of power failure or engine issue. And so Pablo Rojas, he's based out of Miami, but has worked on many of these cases before, got a chance to break down what he thinks so far before we get any more official information from those investigators. And I believe we have an aviation attorney ready to talk who has worked with some of these planes before. I believe, is that all good to go, Carlene?
Right.
All right, so I believe we have aviation attorney Pablo Rojas here. Thank you so much for joining us on such short notice. I know that this is, unfortunately, in your line of work, not an unfamiliar scenario, and it's still preliminary in terms of the information that we have. But I would love to get just your initial thoughts, how you learned about this, and what are your first thoughts after hearing about this?
Sure, and I think Brad hit on a lot of the most important facts that, or seemingly facts that we know so far. I learned about it on the news, maybe like anybody else on the internet. We're based in Miami, but we represent victims nationwide. And once I learned about a plane crash like this is our line of work. We represent victims of plane crashes, and I dug in to learn as much as we can. As you folks were just talking about, we don't know very much right now, but I think Brad nailed it. The flight path that we know so far, the quickness with which the pilots evidently made a decision to turn around and attempt to land again clearly indicates some kind of mechanical issue. Very commonly, when pilots detect an issue with an engine, they detect it right away after takeoff. Takeoff and landing are the 2 most dangerous parts of any flight. And any kind of mechanical issue could prompt a pilot to say, wait a minute, we gotta get back to land. This is not safe to continue this flight. But very, very commonly it's an engine. Now, twin engine aircraft, as Brad was just saying, they can fly with just one. Really, you can fly with 0 if you have enough speed and you can get aerodynamic lift. But it is more challenging. And as Brad was just saying, I completely agree. I think the fact that there are tree debris and they didn't make it to the runway suggests that they were losing quite a good deal of power. So we could be thinking about issues with one engine. We could be looking at issues potentially with both, because you should be able to land an aircraft like this running on one engine if everything else is going well.
Yeah, and for non-aviation experts, I'm sure that's actually probably pretty shocking to hear. We do know that they were not in the air for very long, as you mentioned. I believe only about 10 minutes from the latest that we heard from officials, them crashing at around 10:15 this morning, and the FAA already on scene investigating. Now, I know, as I mentioned, this is not unfamiliar in your line of work. This particular plane, the Cessna C550, is this one that you have experience with in the past?
Yeah, Yeah, Cessna's a very big manufacturer of aircraft. Maybe a lot of your viewers or listeners would have heard of it. And the Citation is their business jets. It's sort of a fancier aircraft. They're different models of Citations. And over the years, like many other aircraft, there have been issues reported. There have been fatal crashes. There have been issues reported in the past related to landing gear. But at this early stage, as you say, the FAA and NTSB are on the ground, if not already, very, very soon. They're going to take exclusive jurisdiction over the wreckage. They're going to conduct the investigation, and hopefully, because I think the families of victims, and from what I've seen on social media, unfortunately, there will be probably several fatalities. They're going to want answers quickly about who was on the flight and what the NTSB has come across. At first glance, it doesn't look like a landing gear issue because, as Brad was just explaining, they didn't even make it to the runway. I mean, this was a loss of power. So sometimes the information from prior crashes is helpful. Other times you have to wonder whether there's something else going on here that doesn't have to do necessarily with these planes. The other thing I would mention is, engines on aircraft are to some extent interchangeable. So we're looking at obviously a Cessna Citation jet, but if there was a loss of power issue with one or both of the engines, then one thing to look at is what was the make and model of the engine, which comes from a variety of manufacturers. I think once that information is obtained, I haven't seen it, perhaps other folks have been able to get it in the short time since this crash. One thing that will be important to look at is what is the history of incidents involving that type of engine, not necessarily that type of plane.
That's really helpful information too, because I know when we first got this and we were looking up the Citation and what we know, I know there's multiple configurations and slightly different models. Originally, we were just trying to figure out how many people were on board, and I'm curious if you are able to know that based on the information you have with how many seats there are. But I think that's helpful for people to know too, is that there's multiple things here. It could be different engines, different models that could also impact the situation.
Absolutely. One of the things we often say when talking about these types of tragedies is that typically it's not enough for one thing to go wrong. Several things have to go wrong for something like this to happen. And both aircraft and engine, meaning the body, the fuselage, but then each of the two engines undergo incredibly intensive and frequent maintenance. At least they're supposed to under federal regulations. So there will have been a lot of people that laid hands on this aircraft and engines over the past several months and years, every 100 hours, every year, at different maintenance intervals. And so it's very complex situation technically. I think the NTSB and FAA will get at some initial impression of what went wrong. As Brad was saying, at first glance, it has something to do with the engines. But then I think you'd be looking at questions not only of the design of the aircraft and the design of the engines, but also the maintenance history. Aircraft and engines both are supposed to have very well documented maintenance histories. And one of the first things the FAA and NTSB, and if other folks eventually get involved, lawyers such as ourselves for victims or any other investigators, they're going to be taking a long, hard look at the maintenance history of whether the aircraft and engines were up to speed with the maintenance that was supposed to be performed, and also whether previous maintenance issues or mishaps had been reported. Sometimes when engines fail, there will be a report that a pilot noticed something that a couple flights ago or a couple months ago that luckily didn't lead to a fatality, and maybe somebody looked at it and signed off on it. Maybe they should have, maybe they shouldn't have. But that type of historical record of previously reported incidents and what type of maintenance was performed is going to be critical in getting answers and getting to the truth of what happened here.
Such helpful information, Pablo. Before we let you go, because I know this is a very busy day and this is just breaking as it's happening, is there anything else we haven't asked about you want people to know?
No, not at all. I think you guys have hit the right points, hit the right questions, and our hearts go out to the victims' families. We deal with this all the time. It's a terrible, terrible thing to happen. This looks like a terrible crash with several fatalities. So I would just close on that note. This is a terrible crash.
Yeah, absolutely heartbreaking, and I appreciate you again taking the time to break this down. I know people appreciate it, so thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Really helpful information, as I said there, from an aviation attorney. It's not often that we get someone on right away after something happens. So I just wanted to say again that this was filmed before we got the official confirmation that Greg Biffle and his family were, of course, on that flight. We do want to get back now to some reaction that we're getting from people all over, people from DC, people from within NASCAR. Starting with Congressman Richard Hudson from the area. He says, "I am devastated by the loss of Greg, Christina, and their children. My heart is with all who loved them. They were friends who lived their lives, focused on helping others. Greg was a great NASCAR champion who thrilled millions of fans and was an extraordinary person as well." He goes on to acknowledge the service that he contributed, not just to the NASCAR community, but of course to Helene recovery. Carlene, I know we might have something going on.
Yes, I just got a word from our digital producers that actually CNN is confirming, we were sourcing CNN, that 6 people have been killed in that crash. 6 people.
So at this point, we've known about 4. We knew about the family. We knew there was likely one more pilot.
Correct.
We do not know who the 6th person is at this point.
At this point, no.
It's hard to say, even more devastating news, but to know another person killed is just a very upsetting news. Thank you, Carlene, for that update. And again, that is via CNN. A source from CNN is confirming a 6th person. We knew about 4 confirmed, most likely a 5th, now a 6th confirmed as well. And so I'm expecting that we'll get some more updates on that within the next couple hours. Hopefully from officials themselves, because again, at this point, we are hearing stuff from sources, from friends of the family, and I'm hoping soon we get an update from the Iredell County Sheriff, though I know they're very, very busy with this investigation overall.
Correct.
Shall we continue on to Justin Marks?
Justin Marks is a team owner for Trackhouse Racing. That he just posted this posted this on X moments ago. One of the silver linings to such a small and intertwined industry is the support and love we have for every member of the NASCAR family. Today is a tough one. We've lost a family that made contributions far beyond the racetrack. Rest in paradise, friends. Exactly kind of what we were talking about earlier, Brad and me and you, that this is, of course, devastating for the NASCAR community, but it's just this family has done so much.
Mm-hmm. And we've got another congressman, too, saying the same thing. I'm not going to make you pull it up because it's short, but it says, "Please join Rachel and me in praying for the family, friends, and all those grieving the loss of Greg Biffle, his wife Christina, and their children. Greg was known not only for his success on the track, but for his generosity and impact he and his family had in their community." This is from Congressman Addison McDowell. So everyone is kind of hitting the same theme that we've been hearing over and over again of just what a generous family, what a generous man.
It's just,
what a huge loss.
It's a tragedy for the community, the sport, motorsports fans, even casual fans. It's just a tragedy all around, and it's kind of hard to put in words, especially because we're just now seeing kind of the scope of the thing. Like we've said before, Statesville Airport's not exactly close to here, so it took us a minute to get there and get eyes on it. And now that we're seeing these images, it's bone-chilling.
Yeah, and I believe this is a live look from the scene. CNN is actually pulling our feed of this right now. So we're all, looking at this, this is what it looks like now from our crew.
And hopefully, I'm not sure if Brad Panovich, our sweet Brad Panovich, if you're listening, is this fog? Is this smoke kind of hanging on from the scene? If he's listening, or please give us a shout, because I'm curious. It just seems it's so hazy.
But you can see how many officials are in there, and I know our Nate Morbido has been looking into some other angles of this while we talk. Carlene, I know he just sent you some sound that we may want to toss to, because Nate is going to pop in just a second here. But I want to just be clear that we've got so many angles that we're working on right now. We have talked extensively at this point about the legacy of Greg Biffle. That is going to be, I think, the main conversation, of the generosity of his family. Just
and not to give it a shake, he was a legend in the sport as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's been out of the race car for a minute now, but the man's a big name.
Big name, big impact.
Not too
family
long ago,
involved.
I think NASCAR named him as one of the top 75 drivers. So, of all time.
Yeah.
So,
not surprising.
Right. It's a huge, just devastating loss in so many ways.
And at the same time, as we grieve, and the whole community grieves, the families grieve, we also now have to deal with what happened here. And of course, that's what the NTSB and the FAA is investigating. That's what our Nate Morbido comes in for. Of course, I know, usually work from home today. You had to come in with such breaking news like this. Where do you start when you're dealing with? I know we've kind of explained on here how our process of the public documents, how do we know that this originally was Greg's plane or related to him? But that's also where you come in looking into these documents, these public records. Where do you begin with something like this?
Yeah, I mean, so unfortunately throughout my career I've covered several plane crashes, and I just got off a call with a former National Transportation Safety Board investigator who I've kind of had a relationship with over the years because of the work that we do, right? And so we know what the tail number is, which is the number that you see on the back of an airplane.
Like a license tag.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It basically, it's a unique identifier for that plane. And then, I pull up, first and foremost, the history of that plane. And we know it's a multi-engine plane. We know it was made in 1981. The investigator I spoke to told me that should not raise an alarm to anyone. That's 44 years old. These generally are maintained very well, much better than cars, even planes. Sure. So just because it was made in 1981, not a big red flag, right? I look at the pilot history. We know that Greg Biffle was on the plane, so I pull his pilot permit certificate, for example. And what I found from that is that in March of this year, he received from the FAA his pilot certificate, and he is certified to fly a single and a multi-engine plane and a helicopter. But what's interesting, and we don't know if he was the main pilot on this either, let me just be real clear. But what this investigator told me, this former investigator, he's now a consultant, and you'll hear from him in a second, told me is that because he was not rated specifically for this type of plane, he could not have flown the plane solely. So again, we don't know if he was the pilot or not. We don't know if he was even in a pilot seat. But we do know he has a pilot license that he got in March of this year. So I want you to listen just for a second from Greg Fife. He is a former National Transportation Safety Board investigator. He would go out in the field.
All right, the conversation continues about this breaking news that we're getting in our newsroom. You were just listening to the conversation with our sister station in Charlotte, North Carolina, as they continue to dig into this. A small plane crash in Statesville, North Carolina. It happened this morning. Several people reportedly dead. The last count that we got as we listened to that conversation, 6 people. The Federal Aviation Administration said the Cessna C-550 crashed while trying to land at Statesville Regional Airport. Among the people on board that plane, retired NASCAR driver Greg Biffle, as well as family members. About 45 miles north of Charlotte is where all of this took place. Preliminary flight tracking information from FlightAware shows the private jet took off from the airport, then flew about 5 miles or so, then made a sharp turn back to the airport. The plane reportedly never got higher than 2,000 feet in the air. Not really known if weather conditions or low clouds, anything to that effect, impacted the flight. If that was actually present at the time of the crash. By the way, the Statesville City website, we just looked at that. It notes that its airport has facilities for Fortune 500 companies, several NASCAR teams as well. The airport does not have a control tower, so we also picked up this information. Pilots must self-report their position using a radio frequency. A lot of conversations happening about this, but again, we learned that this flight never reached above 2,000 feet in the air when all of this took place. Greg Biffle, the retired NASCAR driver, said to be on that plane with family members as well. Just moments ago, I spoke with an aviation expert. I asked him several questions about this and what happens next. Let's go ahead and take a listen. With the flight path expected to come here to the Sarasota-Bradenton area, Sarasota International Airport, SRQ. But that plane was only in the air for a few minutes before it turned around, then crash landed in North Carolina.
Yeah, it appears, they encountered something immediately after takeoff, which isn't an